Hopefully you're a little bit more comfortable now with the idea of using the perspective grids. Well, let's take a minute to talk about how I make the perspective grids. So if you're doing this on paper or wanted to create it from scratch, you've got a couple key elements. First, there is the picture plane. This is going to be where you compose your image. Then, either inside or outside of the picture plane, you have a horizon line. But once you're done with that, you're going to need to make two vanishing points. So I'm going to make one on the left here, and then one a little further away on the right. And then next, you would pull some lines, straight lines from the vanishing points. And for that, I'm going to use the line tool, and I'm going to make sure I turn off any of the vector components. So this just makes rasterized lines that are 2 pixels wide. And I'm just going to pull them across my picture plane. From the left vanishing point, I'm going to give myself some of these lines here. And I'll do the same from the right vanishing point, both above and below the horizon line. And there you can see I've got my perspective grid. Everything inside of the picture plane will give me all the information I need to make my image. Even though the vanishing points are far outside of the image, I could crop them away and it would be fine. But once you start making a lot of these, especially for little sketches or thumbnail drawings, you'll realize they kind of take a while to do. So I've actually gone ahead and created a PSD template that helps you make your own perspective grids. So let's take a look at how that works. So here I've got the same picture plane on its own layer that's got the verticals already built in, and there's a horizon line, but I've also included a left and a right vanishing point, and these already have the perspective lines coming out from them. So what this means is that I can move them. Now it's important that I keep them on the same horizontal plane, so I'm not moving them up or down, only side to side. But you can see what happens when I pull this vanishing point in close into the composition. Or maybe if I move the one on the left far out. You can see that my grid is immediately updated. So I've saved myself a lot of time. Now say I wanted an up shot instead of a down shot. Well, then I would just move the picture plane up in the sky. Or potentially I could even shrink the picture plane and move it around. So this really takes the work out of making these perspective grids, because you can drag a little selection around this, do a flat copy, paste it into a new document, and it does not take long to build up a sheet of thumbnail grids. But what happens when you move the perspective points closer or further away from one another? Well, let's take a look. So here, if I have a pretty simple down shot with the right and left equally spaced with a fair amount of distance, this is what my cube would look like. Pretty standard. Now let's do that same cube would look like if I move the right vanishing point way in close. It's a little bit more distorted. Now if I also move the left vanishing point way in close, it gets very distorted. So as a rule of thumb, it's a good idea to keep some distance between your right and left vanishing points. You're going to get a more realistic result. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to keep your vanishing points far from your picture plane. In fact, watch this. I'm going to move the left vanishing point inside of the image. I'm going to move the right vanishing point way off screen. And now I'll draw a cube. Here it's almost like I'm looking at the cube from a steep angle. So it's not really distorted. This is a realistic viewpoint, but it does definitely have an impact if one of your vanishing points is inside of your composition. Now the reason that you can enlarge or shrink the picture plane is because you could use this same sheet, moving the right and left vanishing points around, and get different results with either a small picture plane or potentially a very large picture plane. But as you see, when I put this large picture plane here, it essentially makes itself closer to the vanishing points. And therefore, when I draw my cube, it's very distorted. Once again, this is kind of like using the wide angle or fisheye lens. But I encourage you to open up this file, which is included in the resources directory, and move these 3 pieces around. And once you find an arrangement you like, drag a selection around it, make a copy, and begin creating sheets of thumbnails for you to practice on. So getting comfortable with this perspective grid system is really important, and you definitely do not have to use this template here. You can draw them from scratch. But either way, it is very important to be able to make an accurate grid, because if the grid is not accurate, your drawing is doomed from the beginning.